had become. At 62, my life had narrowed to a predictable routine. Breakfast alone, staring at the garden Robert planted before he died. Volunteer work at the library 3 times a week, frozen dinners reheated in the microwave, and endless nights watching shows I barely registered. 4 years since cancer took Robert, and I still set 2 cups on the table every morning before remembering. It was my neighbor, Helen, who unknowingly changed everything. She knocked on my door on a rainy Tuesday in March, holding a covered casserole dish and wearing that look of concern older people reserve for important missions. "Margaret, dear, I need a huge favor," she said, stepping inside before I could answer. "My brother just got out of the hospital. Hip surgery. He's alone in that house, far too big for him, too stubborn to hire professional help. And I simply can't climb those stairs 20 times a day with my knees." "Helen, I'm not a nurse," I began, but she was already shaking her head. "You don't need to be. You just need to be kind, which you are. Bring a meal once in a while. Make sure he's taking his medicine. Maybe keep him company. He's proud, but he's scared, then scared men become impossible." She took my hand. "Please. You understand loneliness. You can see through it." And that's how I found myself ringing the doorbell of a light blue Victorian house 2 streets over, holding Helen's lasagna dish and wondering why I had agreed. The door opened, and the world stopped. Thomas Brennan, my first love, the boy who taught me to dance in his parents' kitchen, who memorized every constellation just to show me under the night sky, who left for Vietnam in 1967 and never came back, except Dad. He stood there, leaning on a cane, hair gray, face lined by time, but those hazel green eyes were exactly the same. "Maggie." His voice was rougher, worn, but the way he said my name pulled me back 45 years. The dish nearly slipped from my hands. "Tommy." We stood there on the doorstep as the rain fell and the world kept spinning, yet everything felt suspended in that impossible moment. He was the one who moved first, stepping back to let me in, limping slightly. "Come in before you catch pneumonia," he said, and I obeyed in a daze. The house was lovely, but clearly inhabited by someone alone. Piles of newspapers, 1 chair pulled close to the TV, a single dirty mug in the kitchen sink. I set the dish on the counter, my hands trembling. "Helen didn't tell me," I began, and he gave a short laugh. "My sister has an odd sense of humor, or she's playing Cupid at 83. He leaned against the counter, studying my face. "You look amazing, Maggie." "You're lying, but thank you." I forced a smile. We all thought you were dead. Your name was on the list. Your parents held a memorial." Pain crossed his face. "I almost died, prisoner of war, for 3 years. When I finally came home in 73, you were married. I saw the announcement in the paper. Margaret Louise Patterson weds Robert James Mitchell." He looked down at his hands. "I was happy for you. You deserved happiness." "Tommy?" I waited for 2 years. I waited for news, any news. My voice cracked, and then they said you were missing, presumed dead. My parents begged me to move on. Robert was kind, patient. He knew about, you knew. He was marrying someone who loved a ghost. Did he make you happy? The question was simple but heavy. I sat at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. Yes. Not the way 18-year-olds imagined happiness, but yes, he was a good man, a good husband, a wonderful father to our 3 children. We had 41 years before cancer took him 4 years ago. Thomas limped to the chair across from me, lowering himself carefully. I'm sorry for Robert, for what you had to go through. And you. Helen never mentioned. I married in 1978. Sharon. Met her at a veterans group. She understood the nightmares, the silences. We had no children. I couldn't. A complication from the torture. He said it so casually, but I saw the cost in the deep lines around his mouth. She died 6 years ago. Aneurysm. Quick. We sat in silence, 2 survivors of entire lives, carrying losses words couldn't fully express. The rain drummed on the roof, filling the quiet with its steady rhythm. Why didn't you ever look for me? I finally asked. After you came back, after Sharon died, we've lived in the same small town for decades. Because you had a life, a husband who loved you, children, a family. What right did I have to show up like a ghost from the past and complicate it all? He leaned forward, and after Robert died, Helen told me, but I waited. I thought you needed time. Then I went and broke my stupid hip slipping on the ice, and here we are. Here we are, I echoed, looking at this man who had once been a boy, who had once been my whole world before the war swallowed him. In the days that followed, I developed a routine. I went to Thomas's house every afternoon, brought food, checked his medication, helped with tasks his hip made difficult. But mostly, we talked. Decades of life poured into kitchen conversations as spring gradually melted winter away. He told me about Vietnam things he'd never told anyone. The nights in the jungle when he stayed awake thinking of me, wondering if I still waited. The 3 years as a prisoner when the only thing that kept him sane was imagining our future together. The day he discovered I'd married, and how something inside him simply accepted that the imagined future would never exist. I told him about Robert, about how our marriage was built on solid friendship instead of fiery passion, about our children David, Rachel, and Sarand, how motherhood filled spaces in me I hadn't known were empty, about Robert's final months, how he held my hand and made me promise not to spend the rest of my life alone. But that's exactly what you're doing, Thomas gently pointed out. One April afternoon, as we sat in his garden, he was recovering well, already able to walk short distances without the cane. It's easier that way, I said, watching a red cardinal at the bird feeder. Alone, I don't risk losing someone again. Maggie, look at me. I waited until our eyes met. You've already lost everyone you loved, your parents, Robert, even me, in a way. You already know the worst pain possible. Why keep living as if you're still afraid of it? Tears burned my eyes. Because I'm 62, Tommy. I'm not that 18-year-old girl dancing barefoot in the kitchen anymore. My body aches in places I didn't know existed. I have age spots and wrinkles, and knees that complain when it rains. What kind of romance is that? He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. The real kind, the kind that knows time is too precious to waste, the kind that doesn't care about wrinkles because it sees the person behind them. You don't even know me anymore. I've changed, you've changed. Then, let's get to know each other again, this time as who we've become, not who we were. He squeezed my hand. Unless you don't feel anything, unless looking at me is just seeing an old man with a broken hip. I looked at our interlaced fingers, at the age spots and raised veins life had given us, and I felt something I hadn't in years, not teenage butterflies, but something deeper. Hope. Possibility. The idea that maybe my story hadn't ended when Robert died. I do feel, I whispered. God help me. I feel everything. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles softly. Then let's try. Slowly, no pressure. Just two old fools rediscovering each other. But it wasn't that simple. 2 weeks later, while having dinner at a small Italian restaurant, I had a full-blown panic attack. The walls seemed to close in. My breath shortened. And all I could think was, I'm betraying Robert. I'm replacing him. What kind of person moves on so easily? Thomas took me outside, sat me on a bench under the stars, and just held my hand while I struggled to breathe. Talk to me, he said when I finally calmed down. I don't know if I can do this. It feels wrong. Robert's been gone only for years, and here I am, having dinner with another man, feeling things I shouldn't feel. Do you think Robert would want you to spend the rest of your life alone? No. He literally made me promise the opposite. But knowing that, intellectually and feeling emotionally aloud, are two different things. Thomas was quiet for a moment, looking up at the night sky. Sharon made me promise something similar. At the end, when she knew she was leaving, she said, Tommy, you're too good at hiding. Promise you'll let someone find you again. He looked at me. It took me 6 years to honor that promise, and then you showed up at my door with lasagna. Do you think they knew? Somehow. I don't know. But I do know real love isn't jealous. It doesn't keep someone as property. Robert loved you enough to want you happy, even if that meant being happy with someone else after him. I cried then, all the tears I'd held back for 4 years. I cried for Robert, for the life we had and the one we'd never have again. I cried for the girl who waited for a boy who never came back from war. I cried for all the years Thomas and I had lost, and eventually I cried tears of release, of permission to move on. Thomas just held me, and when I finally stopped, he wiped my tears with his thumb. We'll take it slow, he said, no rush. We have all the time in the world. But we found we didn't have as much time as we thought. A month later, during a routine checkup, my doctor found something concerning. I needed a biopsy, then another. The words breast cancer and early stage floated around me in a fog. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for an hour before I could call anyone. I called Thomas. He arrived in 15 minutes, got into the car, and just held me while I fell apart. I can't make you go through this, I said between sobs. We just found each other again. You've already lost a wife. I won't make you watch someone else die. Maggie, look at me. His voice was firm. I'm not going anywhere. Do you understand? We spent 45 years apart. We lost decades. We'll never get back. I'm not wasting one more day, no matter what comes. If we have a year or 20, I want every moment. But what if I die? Then you'll die knowing you were loved. Completely, wholly loved. He cupped my face in his hands. And if you live when you live, I'll be there for every appointment, every treatment, every heart moment. Because that's what love does. It sews up. The surgery was scheduled 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Thomas was a constant. He came to every doctor's appointment, taking notes when I was too overwhelmed to process. He researched treatments obsessively, prepared my house for recovery, and on nights when fear consumed me, he simply held my hand and reminded me to breathe. My children, initially surprised by this helpful neighbor, gradually understood there was more to it. David was the most protective, worried I was too vulnerable too soon. But Rachel, always the intuitive one, pulled Thomas aside during a visit. "Do you love her?" she asked directly. "Since I was 17, he replied without hesitation. "She's been through a lot." "I know, so have I. That's why I won't waste the time we have." Rachel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you hurt her, you'll answer to 3 very protective adult children." The surgery went well. Clean margins, excellent prognosis, but the recovery was brutal. And for the first time since the diagnosis, I truly broke down. Sitting on Thomas's porch a week after surgery, wearing one of his old shirts because nothing else touched my incisions comfortably, I let it all out. I'm 62. I just had part of my body removed. I have scars that will never go away. What kind of romantic future is that? You deserve better. Thomas set his book aside and, with effort, knelt in front of my chair, his hips still protesting occasionally. "Maggie Patterson Mitchell, listen carefully. I have cigarette-burnt scars from torture. I have nightmares that wake me screaming. I have a hip that will never work right again. I'm 64 and take more pills than vitamins." He took my hands. "We're a mess. Both of us carry damage and loss. And years of living, and I wouldn't change any of it, because it all brought us here. But romance should be. Romance," he interrupted gently, "when you're our age, is finding someone who doesn't mind that it takes you 15 minutes to get out of bed. It's someone who knows your medications as well as their own. It's holding wrinkled hands and seeing the person you loved when those hands were young. It's choosing to stay together despite everything, not because of some imagined perfection." I cried again, but this time they were tears of acceptance. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a lot of time alone to think." He stood with a grunt, then sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Maggie, I can't promise we'll have 50 years together. Maybe we'll have 5? Maybe 20? But I can promise that every day we do have will be filled with more love than most people experience in a lifetime. Even with all our scars, especially with all our scars. They taught us how to be kind, how to cherish moments, how to love without reservation." I leaned against him, careful of my stitches, and for the first time since the diagnosis, I felt peace. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger than fear. 6 months later, On an autumn afternoon, when the leaves turned the world to gold and red, Thomas prepared a simple dinner in his garden. My children were there. Helen was there. A few close friends. There was no grand announcement, just Thomas. Raising his glass, 2 second chances, he said, looking right at me. To love that. Wait. To it never being too late to start again. To choosing joy, I added, lifting my own glass, especially when we've walked through the shadows. Later, when everyone had gone, we stayed in the garden under the stars. Thomas had set up a telescope, and we spent an hour finding constellations he'd memorized decades ago to impress a girl. See that one? He pointed. Cassiopeia. It was the first one I showed you. Remember, you said she was a queen who bragged about her beauty and was placed in the sky as both punishment and reward. I always thought of it as our story. Punishment for being apart, reward for finding each other again. I turned to look at him, the man I'd met when the world was young and found again when we both carried the weight of years. Do you believe in destiny? I believe in choices. I believe in persistence. I believe love never really does it, just waits for the right chance. He pulled me closer, and I believe we deserve this happiness, this new beginning, this love that survived war and loss and decades apart. I leaned against him, hearing his steady heartbeat, feeling the cool night air, seeing the stars that had witnessed our whole story. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt hope. I felt possibility. I felt that my story was just beginning again in a chapter one never imagined writing, but which had already become my favorite.